Welcome to the Nature Photo Guys podcast,
where we talk about nature photography, from gear to our philosophies and everything in between.
So grab a cup of coffee, sit back and relax.
You're listening to Joe Desjardins
and Chris Gibbs, the Nature Photo Guys.
Hey Chris, welcome to another podcast episode. How was your weekend?
It was pretty good, not too bad. Did a little video editing and some photos, but yeah, it wasn't too bad. How's yours? How's the last couple weeks for you?
Not bad. Myself and Monica had the Shoot Till You Drop workshop last weekend, 4 days down in Waterton, which was awesome.
Nice.
We did have a bit of smoke, so it kind of hampered a bit of the photography, but we all made the best with what nature gave us.
Sure.
And worked out quite well. We had the elk out there just screaming at each other and gathering up their harems and stuff. And
nice. Could you get close or still the distance?
It was borderline, you know what I mean? Because you have to respect what the parks want you to do, right? Stay on certain paths and roads and stuff, and not go tromping through there, right? So that was still good. But no, it was great. Red Rock's open in Waterton. And what I heard, don't take this officially, but Cameron Lake Road is supposed to open October 1.
Oh, you're kidding?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So Bear Hump's open. So it looks like everything's going to be back to normal as of October 1st.
Oh, that's nice. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. So that's good.
Yes.
And Monday, I had my Crazy About Wildlife seminar for the Etobicoke Camera Club in Toronto.
Nice.
So it was a couple hours of a PowerPoint presentation I did through Zoom. Had about 100 or so people. It was a lot of fun, actually. Had a good time, a lot of good questions, and I think they enjoyed it. So that's kind of been what I've been up to.
That's what you've been doing. Well, it seems like a lot. So I saw some photos that some people have been posting down from Waterton there, actually from your workshop there, and the smoke sure looked like made a nice red sky, like the sun and all that. Hey.
Oh yeah, I mean it was like a blazing ball of fire, right? Like it really made for some interesting landscapes. So we'll be running that workshop again next year. So keep an eye and ear out if you guys are interested. So
sounds great. Perfect.
Cool. So I think we got some questions too from last episode.
Yeah. So Terry has reached out to us, and in episode 7, we were talking about manual mode and auto ISO, the combination there.
Yep.
And she's just wondering, she says she's enjoyed it a lot. And in fact, she's listened to it too much. She thinks maybe 10 times. So
okay.
That's good, but that's good. You reverse back and forth in case you miss something. You listen to it again, and just so you can follow along as you're learning, kind of thing, right? So
for sure,
that's good. She's wondering what you when we say look at it at 100%. What does that mean? She's asking that question.
I think that was in post, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So what we mean by that is when you're looking at it, say in Photoshop or Lightroom, looking at it 100%, you'll see a little indicator at the bottom of the frame. I know, like in Photoshop on the bottom left-hand side, it says 100%. Looking at it that way will give you a good indication as to whether or not the image is sharp or in focus, that kind of thing. Once you start zooming in 200, 300, 400%, it really gets pixelated, and it's harder for you to tell whether the image is any good. So
sure, yeah.
That's all it really means, is trying to look at it at 100% on whatever program you're using.
Yeah, because you really got to be careful, because if you have like a 4K monitor or whatever, like those Apple 5K monitors, if you hit fit to screen, that's not 100%. You got to be careful there. It's
that's
actually,
right.
The image could
Fitting
be really tiny, right?
Is not 100%. That's right.
Exactly.
Just make sure it's 100% in the program you're using.
Okay. And that was one question. And another question was when we were talking about saying wide open. I think we addressed this in the aperture priority episode as well. But you talked about what do we mean by when we say wide open?
Mm-hmm. And so what wide open means is shooting at the largest aperture possible, right? And what I mean by that, the smallest number. It's a little confusing, right? But so when we say wide open, we mean 2.8, f4, 5.6. So the largest opening in the lens. So that's shooting wide open, which is going to give you some shallow depth of field, right?
Exactly. Okay. And then the other question is, what do we mean by full frame? I guess full frame, as opposed to crop sensor or micro four thirds, that kind of thing, I suppose, right?
Well, I guess the easiest way to explain full frame is basically the size of the sensor is comparable to the size of what a frame of film used to be, right?
Okay, yeah.
I forget what the dimensions are. 36 by...
We can look it up, or she can look it up, or whatever. But yeah, that's basically the equalization.
I'm trying to remember
right?
what it is, but it's basically that's what it is. So it's right now in DSLRs. I think it's the largest sensor you can get. Right? It's a full frame, and micro four thirds is half a full frame, and then crop is depending on the camera. It's either crop factor is either 1.6 for Canon, 1.5 for Nikon, I think, right?
Yeah, Fuji 1.5 as well.
Fuji 1.5. So yeah. So I'm just going to Google it, and the film frame size, and actually I was off by one millimeter. It's actually a 24 millimeter by 36 millimeter, and that's what the standard frame size was of print film, right? The negative. Okay.
Yes.
So full frame size of DSLR size is about, I guess we should have done our research ahead. It's the same.
It is the same. Okay.
Is the same as a single frame traditional? Yeah. Well, there you go. I was right. Doesn't happen very often, but hey, 1 in 30 is okay, I guess.
Let me write that down. Hang on.
September 30th, 2020.
So that's good. That she was just asking about that, I guess, and she just, like she's saying, she's trying to learn the lingo. She's learning all these different terms that we're saying. It's, sometimes I both forget, and everybody forgets. We're talking about things, and things just roll off the tongue, and we know what we're talking about. But I guess not everybody knows what we're talking about either. And
that's right.
So
that's right. So and it's something you just acquire over time.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's good. Like, if you hear some of these things, like you just Googled, you can quickly find that answer out sometimes too. If we can't get back to you right away kind of thing too. So
yeah, for sure.
So that's great.
So this week's episode, what's it going to be about?
Well, I think we're going to, summarize where we've gotten to for up to this episode, I guess, eh? What we've talked about over the
last 8 episodes, right?
Sure, yeah. It's been a couple months, right? So
I think we're just going to recap everything.
Yeah.
We kind of started out with who we were, what's in the bag. Then we went to favorite accessories, and then aperture priority, shutter priority, ISO, manual mode and auto ISO, and exposure comp. So
that's right.
Why don't we just touch base on each of those a little bit and see if we can't summarize everything and maybe put it into a simpler form,
Sure. Yep.
And then next episode, we'll kind of start off with something a little different, move in a different direction.
Sure. A little non-technical maybe, or I guess we'll see,
something like that. Or if anybody has some suggestions for our next episode, we have a long list of stuff we do want to talk about, but if somebody's pretty curious about a certain topic, fire away. We'd be happy to talk about it. So
for sure we will. Yeah, that's exactly right. So I guess so the first one was what we talked about ourselves, I guess, right? So anything new with you, Joe?
No, you?
No, let's move on. Okay, so
that's done.
Okay.
So let's talk about what's in the bag. Okay, so we kind of covered that, and I guess the biggest question is, since we first started, are you guilty of the gas? And a friend of mine, Barb, brought that up the other day. It's gear acquisition syndrome.
Oh.
So have you purchased anything new in the last 2 months or so that would kind of relate to nature photography?
Not really. Well, I guess I talked about it in these episodes. I bought that Fringer device, so now I can use my Canon zoom lenses on my Fuji cameras, which is actually going really good. I've been using them quite a bit, and it's actually the amount that it's helping, and the autofocus and everything is great. So I'm not. You can buy that. Like I said, it was $500, and it's a Fringer device that allows you to put on the Fuji camera, add your Canon lenses, and now I don't have to buy, $2,000, zoom lens again for now, right? It's always best to use the actual lenses or whatever that fit on the camera, but temporarily right now, the Canon lenses are great. So really, that's really all I bought. I've been trying not to, trying to run a business here as well, so being a little frugal, and And what about yourself?
No.
No.
And you know what? I think the camera store is missing me.
Are they?
Because actually, I forget who went in. I think it was my brother that went in, and they asked, like, where's Joe been? And it's like saving money.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I came to the realization the realization was I have the gear to produce the images I want, right?
Yeah.
Like got a couple of camera systems, quality glass. I've got camera bags. I got a gear room,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've got enough to do what I need to do. And so I'm really trying hard not to purchase anything and just do the best I can with what I have, and I have more than enough right now. It's actually pretty ridiculous. I sold off a couple of bags and, I still got 6 more, but you know what I mean? Like I just, I'm trying to,
I know I'm starting to sell things too.
Trying to unload a few things and that kind of thing. So no, I haven't acquired any new gear. Just trying to do the best I can with what I have. So
that's a good reason. And I'm about that too right now.
And you know what? I think most people do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Really, you just need a camera body and a lens, and you can go shoot landscapes and wildlife,
Yeah, that's true.
And I'm telling you, like I said before, any lens is a wildlife lens and any lens is a landscape lens. I talked about that last night in the webinar I had.
Yep.
And I mean, traditionally longer lenses for wildlife, wider lenses for landscape, but you can create both styles of images using both styles of lenses, right?
Sure. Yep. Fair enough.
So don't get hung up on all that gear, guys, as far as not thinking you have, the proper stuff to get certain images anyways. Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I truthfully always tell myself or tell people that I'm addicted to technology, right? So,
yeah, you are.
I am. I know I am.
You're the Zoom guy because I don't even know how to set up you send me a link and I click okay. So.
There you go. So I'm guilty of that, but I've been really trying hard because you're right. At the end of the day, I make prints, I sell my prints. So why do I need new stuff if I'm still able to create images that are good enough right now for that, right?
So for now, it's I'm good.
Okay.
Sounds like you are. So
I am good too. Yep.
So that kind of rolls into our episode on favorite accessories.
Sure.
I haven't acquired anything new. We talked about the basics of what to carry and what we have in our bags. So if people want to review that, they can go back to that episode.
Yep. Exactly. I'm the same.
So we touched on getting out of auto. And that was aperture priority.
Yep.
And again, I still think if you're coming out of auto mode, I still think aperture priority is still the best way to go. It's simple. Put it on AV or A, right? Set your ISO according to the amount of light you have, right?
Yep.
If you're shooting wildlife, it's usually earlier in the day, later in the evening. So, 400, 800 ISO, set your lens wide open, right? At 4, 5.6. And let the camera decide on shutter speed based on, what it thinks is the proper exposure.
Sure.
And it should be that simple. Now, I know the terminology can, people can get hung up on that and that sort of thing. But really, guys, it is that easy once you start playing around with it. You have to get out there and just see. But the biggest thing I would take away from that is pay attention to your shutter speed. So you've set your aperture, you set your ISO, watch your shutter speed. The camera's changing that all the time, depending on where you're aiming your camera, right? For aiming it into the woods, your shutter speed is going to drop, right? Because it's darker. If you're aiming it towards the sky or a wide open area, it's going to get faster. So, just really pay attention to that. And when you start hearing like click, the shutter is a little on the slow side. So you may want to bump up your ISO. So, but I mean, that's pretty much it in a nutshell, right?
Yeah, I find myself that, even when I turn the camera on, it's kind of become a habit. That's the first thing I do is quickly put in aperture priority, adjust where I think I need to be. But just as soon as I turn the camera on, then I pick it up. And then, okay, now what I'm doing, right? And then I may readjust. But that's just become a habit of mine. Just put it in aperture priority.
That's right. Yeah. So, I mean, and that's the same. Well, we'll talk about the other modes there in a minute. But, again, if anybody has any questions about that, just fire us, an email or leave a comment. The next one was shutter priority. And again, guys, it's just like aperture priority. Set the shutter speed to what you want it at, right? set your ISO, and the camera's going to pick the aperture for you. And the only, okay, how do I say this? The only drawback I see to that for me in my style of shooting is that the camera's controlling the depth of field.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like it could give you a shutter speed of f11, or I mean, an aperture of f11, you know, when you want f4, you know, and that sort of thing. So I personally would rather watch my shutter speed and aperture priority than watch my aperture and shutter priority.
Shutter priority, yeah, fair enough.
But that's just me. That's you know, if you're shooting sports and you're in a, you know, in a lot of bright light, and you know you're more comfortable shooting shutter priority and setting it to, you know, 1/1000th of a second or whatever, you know, have at it, right? But I think it's more, in my personal opinion, I think it's more pertinent to be aware of depth of field with wildlife, you know, and paying attention to the shutter speed. So
if there was a choice in, say, Churchill between aperture priority and shutter priority, I know there's another setting we're going to talk about as well, but what would you choose in that scenario with the white 100%. Snow? Yeah.
There's not a scenario where I would ever use shutter priority.
Okay.
To be honest with you, because if I need a really fast shutter speed, right, I'm going to shoot wide open, and I'm going to increase my ISO till I get the shutter speed I want.
Fair
right.
enough. Yep.
So I'm always going to I've learned aperture priority so well that I can get whatever shutter speed I want. I can make the adjustments I want using that one mode.
Right. Yes.
Right?
You just know. Yeah.
That's right. So, anything on that, Chris? Is that
no? I agree. I mean, there's been a couple of times that I've done that as well. Like you were talking about sports in an arena on the ice. I've done that the odd time because I want my shutter speed at a certain thing for, you know, goalies making saves and the puck flying, that kind of stuff. But most of the time I'm the same way. Like out in the field, I'm aperture priority 9 times out of 10 these days. Yeah. But you know, and I've been trying a few other different settings as well that we'll talk about here too. So
yeah, for sure. And to top off the series of 3 there, we talked about ISO, and how that comes together, the exposure triangle, if you guys want to Google that, and how it works. And basically ISO is the film speed, right? Like back in the day, 400, 200, 100, whatever it was.
Exactly.
Velvia 50. So basically it's the sensor sensitivity to light. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
So the more you increase the ISO, the more sensitivity to light is, then the faster shutter speed you're going to get.
Yeah. And there's a couple issues that you got to look out for, right? So if you go too high on the ISO, going to get some grain introduced, I suppose.
That's right. So you got to watch that. You got to be comfortable with whatever ISO you choose. So again, test your camera, and there's going to be a cap somewhere that you're not going to be comfortable. So say a certain camera, 3200 is about the highest I'm going to go because it just gets too grainy for me. You know,
that's
I
right.
prefer to shoot at 1600 or less, or some people may be comfortable at 6400, you know?
Yep.
But truth be told, you always want to try and use the lowest ISO possible, right?
Sure.
Like,
yes.
Even if you're comfortable at 800 or 1250, whatever it is, if you can get away with 400, shoot it at 400. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, you always want to strive for the lowest ISO possible. So,
exactly.
You know, the better you get at hand holding, shooting off a tripod, lowering those shutter speeds, you know, the lower you can get for the ISO, right? So,
yeah, I agree. I mean, all my landscape shots, my Canon 5D Mark III, I can get to ISO 50. So I want the best detail as much as possible. So I always strive to hit ISO 50 every single time.
Yeah, then it's a nice clean image, right?
It is.
There's little to no grain at all. So
exactly. Yeah, for sure.
So that's ISO.
Yep.
ISO. So you can see how ISO, aperture, and shutter all work together, right? Exposure triangle.
Exactly.
And then the last setting we talked about was shooting in manual mode, but the key there was in using auto ISO.
Right. In conjunction in manual mode, basically. Yeah.
That's right. So setting that up, you know, I put it, what I say is I like using manual because I can set the aperture to what I want for depth of field, the shutter speed for the stopping power that I want, and then I let the camera choose the ISO based on the proper exposure. Right. So I know I'm not going to drop down to a certain shutter speed that I'm not comfortable shooting with, at a certain focal length. I'm still going to get my wide open aperture that I want. And this is shooting wildlife, guys. This isn't like doing a landscape shot. This is wildlife.
Yeah. You get your depth of field for the animals. And
that's right. Yeah. And then the camera chooses the ISO. So ideally, let's say I want a minimum of 1/250th of a second. Okay. For my shutter speed, I'm going to shoot at f5.6, right? Okay. And then the ISO is going to make the decision it wants. So in that case there, what do you have to pay attention to now? ISO, right?
ISO, yeah, especially as the light's going away.
That's right. So what do you do in this case here? Well, if you're shooting wide open, you can't make it any larger. So if the ISO is getting too high and out of your comfort zone, then just drop down your shutter. So you see, no matter what mode you're using, you're always going to have to make adjustments, right?
Yes.
There's no magic formula that, you're going to set all three and be happy, right?
Exactly.
There's always one factor you have to look at all the time. So in that case here, which I shoot manual without ISO primarily all the time now. Okay. And so what I'm doing is all I'm paying attention to is the ISO. And if the ISO is getting too high, then I'll just drop the shutter speed.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's about it. So
that's one. If it's one thing to remember, that's pretty good. It's not like you have to remember a whole bunch of things. It's really just one function that you have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm paying attention to my shutter also, my shutter speed, making sure it's fast enough.
Yes.
But what I'm really paying attention to is the ISO, so it doesn't climb up there too high, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's about it. I mean, as far as camera settings go, like I've always said, pick one, get really good at it, and then you can try something else. Don't, one day try aperture priority, next day try shutter priority, next day try manual, and the next day try manual without ISO, and then on and on. It's just going to confuse the crap out of you, right?
Yeah.
So, my suggestion would be start with aperture priority and take it from there.
I agree.
And that takes us into our next topic, which was exposure compensation.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the last topic we talked about, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was our last episode.
Yeah.
Yep.
Our last episode. So exposure compensation, in a nutshell, allows you to override the camera's exposure by either making the exposure lighter or darker, right?
Yep.
The way the camera reads a certain scene can make an image look underexposed or overexposed. And in that case there, using exposure compensation can help you get the exposure right in camera.
So that would be the answer to people saying, well, why can't I just do that in post? I can just brighten it up or whatever in post, but you just said it, right? In camera is the ideal scenario.
The closer you can get it in camera, the less you have to do in post. And I guess I could say the tighter the image is going to be, because I can give you an example. If you just decided not to use exposure compensation and the image came back underexposed by a stop and a half, let's say.
Okay.
You're going to go into Lightroom or whatever program you use, and you're going to take that slider a stop and a half to the right, maybe even more, maybe even past neutral, like 0, and go to plus 2/3 or a full stop or something. That's really going to affect the quality of the image. Okay. That's going to start opening up shadows. It's going to introduce color noises. There's a lot of bad things that can happen, right? Mm-hmm. So if you get it as close as you can in camera, and you have to adjust either side, a half a stop, 2/3 a stop, either, it's not even.
Yeah, it's minimal, right?
Yeah, it's minimal. It's not even a concern. No. So that's why, using exposure compensation is a benefit.
Yeah.
Now, with mirrorless cameras, I mean, what you see is what you get. So it's beautiful. I mean, on my G9, when I'm looking and the exposure is a little off, all I have to do is hit my exposure comp, turn the dial, and I'm either brightening the scene or, darkening the scene until I like it.
Yeah.
Take the picture, and I know I've got the exposure before I even get home,
Yeah, that's
so
right.
Mirrorless cameras are awesome for that.
Yeah.
But with DSLRs, it takes a little more practice. you know.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, using exposure compensation with aperture priority, you know, easy peasy, right? You know, if you're really not sure, take a shot, look at the back of your camera, like engage your histogram, and you know, if the histogram is touching the left side, everything's underexposed, and you know to adjust your exposure compensation to the right. You know, you want to lighten the scene. And again, if you look at your histogram and it's pretty much touching the right hand side, then you want to underexpose. So darken the scene a little. Now, that's that's kind of a general concept, right? Okay. Because there are exceptions, right? So there's a lot of times where most of the histogram is going to be to the right, let's say photographing polar bears in the snow scene.
Oh, fair enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a proper histogram, you know, as long as it's not absolutely touching the right, then it's, you're going to get, you know, it's going to be a good exposure. Highlights aren't going to be blown out, et cetera, right? And the same thing too, if you're photographing a black bear coming out of the dark forest, you know, most of it's going to be to the left-hand side, right? You know, and a lot of times, you know, it's going to, part of the histogram is going to touch the left or the right-hand side. And you may have some, so if it's on the right, some highlights may be blown out a little, but that may be okay, you know? And then the same with on the dark side, you know, some of the shadows may be black and that could be okay too. I mean, it's going to touch if you're doing silhouettes.
Yeah. And there is pure whites and there is pure blacks, right?
Yeah. So, you know, just keep that in mind. So I guess we should do an episode on histograms.
Yeah,
you know,
we could do that.
We could probably do that in future episodes, but that's just a real short and sweet, you know, explanation, right? So
yeah, because I was going to mention the histogram as well. You know, the people with mirrorless cameras, there is functionality. You can put the histogram on in live mode, right? So you can actually make your adjustments and actually see the histogram. You don't even have to take that picture. You can actually make the adjustments and see the histogram yourself.
That's right.
And sometimes, you know, I end up relying on the histogram. Bright sunny day, whatever. Sometimes the LCD screen, you can't really see it, but you can see the histogram and you can just pay attention to that, right?
Yeah, for sure. I know we haven't touched on the histogram, but again, guys, you know, it's something you can Google and just see quickly what, you know, what it means and that kind of thing, right? So
yeah, that's a visual example for sure, that one.
Yeah, exactly. But again, with experience, you just kind of know, like when I was up in Churchill, I started with +1.5 overexposed every day.
Yeah.
I'm in snow and the bears are white. Like, you know what I mean?
What do you do? Yeah.
Yeah. What are you going to do? Like, you know, so I'm not going to start at neutral and then, you know, figure it out as I go. Right. So
no, exactly.
Certain scenarios, it just works that way. Right. So
yes. Yeah.
But, but I think that's, you know, that's kind of a quick and dirty wrap up, you know, of what we have talked about.
Well, we talked about a lot over the last, you know, the last multiple episodes. There's a lot of in-depth stuff we talked about too. So like you said before, like we've mentioned a lot. If you guys have any questions, let us know and we can raise them on the next episode as well, or get back to you in email or on social media or YouTube. So
yeah, exactly. And, you know, we are always looking for topics, specific topics, you know. Maybe some topics we might have to research a little, you know, something we need to learn, you know,
that's true.
Anything and everything, man. It's a lot of fun, right? So,
oh yeah, absolutely. For sure it is.
Not necessarily stuff that we know what we're talking about. And even then, I don't know if we really know what we've been talking about in the last 8 episodes. Just kind of hope it comes across like it does, I guess.
Well,
you know?
Yeah, and truthfully, I mean, you know, for everybody out there who's just beginning or whatever, you know, again, you know, we talked about this in episode 1. Joe has 30 years experience. I don't. You know, I've only been doing this for I've been taking photos all my life, but not to the state that I've been doing over the last 6, 7, 8 years, right?
That's right. Yeah,
we all have different experience levels. Some of the things we've talked about, maybe I don't fully understand as well, or whatever, right? So people out there, don't be afraid, you know, ask us questions. There's no stupid questions. So feel free to let us know, right?
What I find too, a lot of times, guys, is you learn from it, right? I'll learn something from a question. It happens all the time when I'm teaching or I'm in a workshop and somebody asks a question. I'm like, oh, I never thought of it that way. You know?
Yes. Yeah.
And there you go. You know, learn something.
Yeah. Because everybody's got a different angle on how they, you know, understand or ask their question, right? So it's, you can look at it different ways, just like the camera can make different adjustments. You can, you know, do different things too. So yeah, any question, ask us, let us know. There's no stupid question. We might have a stupid answer, but
yeah, exactly. You can't fault us for that.
No, exactly.
We always do our best.
There you go.
So, but I think that's it. I know this one's probably on the shorter side. What do we got for time there?
No, this is a long one. Actually.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, we're over 30 minutes. So, you know, you and I just sit here and talk and chat, and, you know, time flies by. So when we're having fun, right?
Okay, I thought we cut. I thought it felt like 15 minutes, to be honest with you. Because I thought we were rushing through all the topics too fast, right?
Yeah. No worries.
No, that's awesome. So, our next episode, we'll come up with maybe moving a little different direction. Yep. Unless we've got a request from you all. So
yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, I think that was another good episode.
Yeah, I think so.
A little informative. And I think we'll just leave it at that.
Sounds good to me, Joe.
All right. Till next time.
All right. Catch you in a couple weeks.
All right. Bye for now, guys.
Thanks, everyone. You've been listening to the Nature Photo Guys podcast. If you have any questions, contact us at info@thenaturephotoguys.ca or message us on Facebook and Instagram at the Nature Photo Guys podcast. Make sure you listen to all our new episodes on www.thenaturephotoguys.ca or visit your major podcast providers, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We'll catch you next time on the Nature Photo Guys podcast.